thank you all for having us in here and for giving us an opportunity to present this morning. This is a topic I'm super passionate about, and let me just do a quick little background here on our company here, and if I can get my clicker to work, here we go. So again, my name is Reid. I'm the CEO of Telcion. I'm also a voice CCIE. We got started with Telcion back in 2002, actually to focus on at the time, this new thing called voice over IP. And so we started working on that transition then of trying to move people from a traditional PBX type system onto voice over IP type systems. And so what's so interesting to me is that now, 20, 25 years later, and now we're in a situation where we're doing another major transition that's going on, and where things are starting to migrate out to the cloud. And so we're talking to clients about, hey, how do we make that transition? Are there hybrid approaches? How do we make our collaboration tools that we're starting to get used to with all this video stuff we're doing and the meetings we're in? Can we integrate those things together? What are our options? And so here we are. We're starting like a whole new transition that's starting to begin with our voice over IP stuff. So what is calling and collaboration in today's world? So what's really interesting to me is that as we get into this, there's just a lot of verbiage going on, and the verbiage is a little different than what I have been used to in my tenure doing these kind of solutions. But it's stuff that it's like glossary index of like, hey, if you're talking to a vendor and you're starting to do some research and you're trying to evaluate products and solutions for what you're doing, you're going to need to understand what these different pieces of the puzzle are. So I wanted to just talk through these a little bit. When we talk about collaboration or a collaboration suite, or if we talk about calling, there's really 5 major components that get broken down. So let's walk through those. So the first one's a relatively easy one. It's just a calling platform. And so when we're talking about whether it's on premise or in the cloud or whatever, it doesn't matter. Calling is going to be any kind of a point-to-point or person-to-person phone call that I'm making, either inbound or outbound. It might be internal, it might be across the PSTN network to be able to talk to somebody else at another location. But it's just that voice calling component. And so I've traditionally just referred to it as voice. But nowadays you'll see a lot of vendor products and so forth that just refer to it as calling. And so you just need to know that it's kind of the audio portion of our collaboration world that we're in. The next component is around messaging. And so traditionally messaging would be around voicemail. And so, and you'd actually have a separate licensing for voicemail and so forth. Nowadays, voicemail is really just, if I buy calling, I get voicemail with it as part of the package in most vendors' environments. So now when we talk about messaging today, it more has to do with messaging from a chat perspective. So what kind of chat capabilities do I have? Group chat kind of capabilities. And I'm betting that most of you are probably familiar with that either from 1 of 3 products, either from Slack, from Microsoft Teams, or from Cisco WebEx. And so all those platforms have major chat features. And of course, Slack was the innovator around this kind of stuff, and Microsoft and Cisco and others have joined on that bandwagon. But those are the 3 major ones. When we talk about messaging, that's one of those platforms is usually what we're referring to. Then we have meetings. And so meetings are what we're doing right now. We're using, in this case, we're using Zoom to do meetings. There's other platforms to do meetings. Again, whether it's Microsoft Teams or WebEx, those are the big ones. Those 3 are the top 3 big ones that are there from a meetings perspective. And then we have video, which is often either it's a point-to-point or an audio call that can be a video call. It's between applications. We're all familiar with the basic stuff like FaceTime and those kind of things, but these are enterprise versions of video where I'm using an enterprise application, often an app like Teams or WebEx or something like that to do basic video calls. But it also includes conferencing and not conferencing, but conference rooms. And so when you're looking at conference rooms, it's the video devices you might put in those rooms and how those video devices might integrate into the platform that I'm using and so forth. And so that's another layer that's there. And then finally is contact center. Now, I don't know if there's a lot of contact center usage within the education environment. I haven't traditionally seen a lot of usage there, but just generally speaking in the commercial environment, contact centers, when you call in and then you usually get some menu prompts and eventually you get into queue to talk to an agent. And so something of that form factor, and that'd be a contact center, and that's just another feature item that's in this package. So what's interesting here then is that when you're looking and you're researching for today's communication tools, you're going to end up with a whole variety of these one of these 5 things or all of them, depending on how you're looking at it. So they're either going to be line itemed out, there'll be a separate license for it, it could be a bundle. But you just need to know that when you're talking to someone or you're doing research and you see the word collaboration or you see the word calling, just know that there's multiple components that make up the feature sets, and you've got to make sure that you're looking at all, know what you're looking for, know what pieces you're needing, and what makes up the solution you're trying to put together. So what software platforms are in the marketplace today? So I've already mentioned a handful here, and so let's kind of get into them. There's really 3. There's 2, 3, 4 major players that are there. The ones that you're familiar with, again, Microsoft Teams is a big one. Cisco WebEx, Zoom is newer to the market. They've got the meetings component, but they're starting to add they've been adding the calling component to it. Other ones I didn't write up here. I mean, RingCentral's out there, Five9. If I go out and do a search right now and just say, hey, give me some VoIP or VoIP cloud providers, you'll get a long list of providers that are out there. But the key thing that you've got to understand is when you're looking at these providers is that many of them are single feature set. So, or they've got a couple feature sets that they're dealing with, and so those are the things you want to be looking for. And they may be focused on just the small business market. And so, a lot of times I'll look at some of these vendors, and it's like, look, they're great, they're fantastic platforms for that small business, less than 25 users. They don't have a lot of major feature requirements and so forth, but most, especially you guys, it's like you're in environments that need advanced features, that need enterprise features. And when you start looking at it from that angle, it really starts reducing the number of vendors that are out there that can do a lot of things. Now, I'm just listing out, collaboration tools here. But there are, obviously there's a lot of telephony vendors that have been around for a long time. They've got some opportunities here. But I'm mostly just looking at this from a collaboration tool perspective, new communication tools, because I believe that's where most of the questions are that we get from our clients is hey, I've got these tools, how do I make them work with my systems, and maybe what else might be out there. So what I want to make sure you understand is like, hey, here's some different platforms, but a lot of what's driving this is what platform has the features you're looking for in. So you hear me say that kind of over and over again as we're going through this presentation. So all right, so let's kind of break this down a little bit. So let's get into some. I'm going to cover a bunch of different angles here. So we're going to talk about cloud or on premise. We'll talk about technical requirements. How to integrate some things. So there's a lot of different angles here we're going to go at. So one of the big questions that I get, and I suspect is a major question you guys are, many of you are probably going through right now, which is, do I go cloud or do I go on premise? What kind of communication system am I trying to migrate to? And then based on the tools that I'm wanting to use for communication and so forth, what's the best angle for me to go after? And so the comparison that I want to make here is very similar to where we were at 20, 25 years ago when we were transitioning from the PBX market into voice over IP. And so back then what happened is that as we're trying to make that transition is that we would be out talking to clients going, hey, here's the reasons why you ought to move to voice over IP. And so we give them the different reasons that are there. Most people could buy into that. And then the very next problem that we ran into is the features that they needed. And so the problem we would run into is that PBX world had been around for decades, and so they had built up these software suites that just had hundreds and hundreds of features that people could use. And so as we're trying to migrate them to a new platform, the problem we ran into is that we just didn't have the maturity yet in the platform to deliver all the features that we needed. And so a lot of the problem then just kind of boiled down to, what exactly do you need to be able to do? What are the minimum requirements you're going to have? And that's where we're at today with this transition into the cloud. And so, just as a quick example, I mean, as late as like 2005 or so, I mean, we still didn't have music on hold capabilities in the voice over IP platforms. And so, something that you just like, it was just an audit, like everyone just assumed you had, those kind of basic features, and we didn't have that ability yet. And so it's just stuff like that. And so we're finding that same thing now in this cloud platform. And so as we look at different cloud vendors, different providers, it's just boiling down to like, what features do they have? And of course, what do our clients need in order to be able to actually operate? And so that really is probably one of the bigger driving factors in all this. And then depending on what your timeline is, can you wait long enough before you make a move? Or, hey, I need to make a move for some other reason. So, for example, maybe my existing phone system has just been around too long and it's already, it's way past end of life, and I need to replace it and I need to upgrade it. I'm having failures. I need to do something. And so you may just be in a situation where I need to do something and you can't, and the cloud just doesn't have the features you need yet, and you're just going to have to stick with an on-premise solution, just the next iteration. And so you'll be able to look at it from that. You'll be able to have to look at it from that vantage point, and maybe picking a vendor that'll give you the best opportunity to eventually transition to the cloud when that time comes, or the best opportunity to integrate with existing or with some of these collaboration apps that are out there. So that could be it, or maybe you're just at a place where like, look, we just want to know, hey, how can we start making sure we're planning and moving towards the right kind of cloud solution that might be out there, and so forth. So we'll talk through some of those options that are there, but that's the main driving component here for us, is just the how do we move to the cloud if it doesn't have all the features that we need. And so now the beauty about from a cloud perspective is that we start looking at these cloud tools and cloud telephony systems is that they have very quick iterations. And so every month they're adding new features. And so they move through features very quickly. It doesn't take anything to do an upgrade. That's what I love about cloud platforms, is that at least I guess from our clients' perspectives, they're not having to worry about upgrades and every 2 or 3 year upgrade cycle, and that whole thing. It's like it just kind of happens. And so the ability to run up and to add features quickly in that platform is really great. So you can also just kind of look at, what's my timeline? When am I trying to make the move? Will the features be there when I need them to be there, and so forth. So that decision on cloud or on premise, it just largely comes down to, what features do I need right now to be able to make that move? The last thing I might mention there just kind of comes down to, it's like, do the features you have today, do you really, really need them as you move forward? And so often what I'll find is that our clients they have a lot of features available, so they just implemented some stuff. Often they're not even using some of those features, or I'll have a 500-person organization and 3 people are using this one feature, kind of thing. It's like, does that hold up the whole organization from being able to make a transition? Or can we find another way to solve that problem? Or can they wait, 6 months or a year for that feature to eventually show up in the new platform when it gets there? Because eventually it will mature. It'll get there. All right. So how do these tools and platforms coexist with existing telephony? So I'm going to talk. The next 3 slides kind of go like this. So we're talking about coexisting versus can I replace my existing infrastructure with some of these new communication tools versus going all the way, let's say just going all the way cloud. So let's just kind of walk through that a little bit. So one of the big questions that I get is the, hey, I'm running Microsoft Teams, and you'll hear me say this over and over again here, because Microsoft Teams comes free for a lot of people based on the packages of Office 365 they're buying and licensing they're already buying and so forth. So just naturally, Microsoft was late to this game, but they have they've made big strides just because it's easy for people to get access to. And so we walk into organizations, they're already using Teams. And all they want to know is, and as you guys may already know, it's like, once you're in a particular communication tool and you're chatting and using it, and you've got it all set up, it's very difficult to make a move to a new one. And so the question I get is just, can we integrate it with an existing on-premise system? And the answer is, you can integrate it. And so now we do a lot of Cisco in our world. I'm not trying to make this presentation about Cisco, but I can use it as a reference base. I know in our Cisco world of things, Cisco's worked very hard, as a lot of other vendors have too, to make sure they've got good integration with that Microsoft Teams app. And so what that means is that I can get that Microsoft Teams app to be able to have a plugin for a Cisco backend or other vendors backend. So they can do, so I can have that be my primary application or communication tool that people are using. And then we're able to initiate, anytime there's any kind of calling initiation or even meeting being initiated, it then leverages that backend that we've got. And so, and then we're also able to work from from a hybrid perspective where we're able to, hey, well, let's make a slow transition. So we're going to have both we'll have a cloud component and an on-premise component, and we can start moving people from one to the other, but yet there's still full communication going on between both. And so it allows for an easier, simpler transition as we're trying to move in that direction. So the main point I want to make here is that there's a lot of options just as far as being able to take those apps, these new apps, and make them work with potentially with a system you already have on-prem. Now, it's not all systems, and I mostly, I'm very familiar from a Cisco perspective, but I know there's other vendors that also have some options around that. The industry has recognized that Microsoft is the big player in the game, and they better be able to integrate with them. And that's what people are using, and so we got to be able to make sure that if that's what people want, that they can communicate with my backend. So the question now is just, can these tools, and when I talk about these tools here, I'm really just talking about these collaboration tools that we're using, Teams, WebEx, Zoom, that kind of thing. These are collaboration tools that we're using. Can these replace your existing infrastructure? So let's just kind of talk through that a little bit. And again, a lot of this really depends, again, based on what kind of features that you're wanting to have. So if all I need is basic telephony features, I just be able to make phone calls, be able to call someone's phone number, receive a call on a phone number, that kind of scenario. If that's all I need, then these platforms can definitely do that. And so there's capability to be able to do that. However, I know many of you, especially in the education market, that one of the major advanced features that is needed is around notifications, paging, emergency notification, that kind of stuff. Those are advanced features. And so as soon as I look at that, it's like my ability to be able to look at one of these collaboration apps and be able to also have those features, and that's my only system, that starts really limiting the number of vendors that are capable of doing that. So just as an example, Cisco WebEx, and let me explain just for a moment on the WebEx platform. If you're not familiar, Cisco's kind of rebranded WebEx over the last 2 or 3 years. And so it's not just meetings anymore. So WebEx used to be just meetings. That's what people would refer to it as, just meetings. When we say WebEx now, it's the entire suite of collaboration features that are out there. So it's calling and meetings and messaging and contact center and video. It's all of those things. And so when we say WebEx, they have a very similar app to the Microsoft Teams app that's out there as well. So all that said, and like I said, it completely integrates to the Teams side as well. So what my point here is that just this year, even on the WebEx platform, has it matured to a place where it knows how to integrate with paging, on-site paging and notification and those kind of things. And so there are very few platforms out there that are able to do those advanced scenarios. So the question as to whether it can replace your existing telephony infrastructure or not is completely based on those advanced whether you need those advanced features or not. And so that's going to be the driving factor. And over time, it will, like I said, it will mature. And so my expectation is that more platforms will be able to do it over time. But there are I know of at least one that can do some of those features today. But even on that platform, it's relatively new. So, okay, let's talk about some technical requirements, and this will start getting into the nitty gritty here of your questions that you've got. So, I'm going to do my best here to try and answer these. So the first thing here is around internet. So technical requirements. So if I'm trying to integrate these collaboration tools like Teams or WebEx and so forth, I'm trying to integrate those applications into my system in some flavor, whatever flavor that is. One of the very first things we got to deal with is internet. And so, now most people have pretty good internet these days. Most of our customers that I run into have fiber coming into their buildings. So that's not necessarily the main issue. But the question you've got to ask yourself is just how reliable is even that internet? And so you might look at it and say, look, how much downtime have I had in the last year? In most cases, what I find is that if you've got fiber coming in your building, you might have had a 4-hour outage in the last 12 months, maybe. And so it's just a general rule. So you just have to ask yourself the question, can I handle a 4-hour outage or not? And then the question becomes and with our dependency moving more and more towards cloud type applications, do I need to consider having a more robust, resilient internet connection to be able to have failover and hey, this internet connection's down, but I can route out this direction. Or, I'm thinking like in a school environment, it might be a scenario where, look, I know my elementary school here is connected to my WAN and it backhauls internet traffic out, a corporate office of some kind, a district office of some kind to get out. But maybe the school, maybe you have local internet at that school site as well. So it has the ability that if my WAN gets severed for some reason, I've got another path. And so to be able to continue to have good internet. So those are really valid questions. You've got to decide how important is that to us, and is that something I'm willing to deal with or not. So that's a way of dealing with that internet, that reliability internet thing. Another component you might consider is that all of these apps that we're talking about, these collaboration apps that we're talking about, they all have mobile versions of them. And so if I go to I'm on my iPhone, I want to pull, like I said, I have both Microsoft Teams and WebEx on my phone, so I can pull up either one of those apps and I can place or receive calls on a business number through those apps on my phone. So if my internet goes down, well, it doesn't really matter. It's just going to route the call over the 5G network and to my mobile device, and I can still place and receive calls. And so again, is that acceptable in your environment? What kind of situation do you have? And so those are some of the questions you've got to answer on whether is it important enough to is that good enough, or do you need I've got to have that's just not going to be acceptable in our environment. So that's what you've got to see. The other side of it is let's look at the survivability component here, just as kind of a flip side of it, is that you can look at what kind of survivability options do we have with some of these solutions. Now, so typically if you had an on-premise solution in the past and you were trying to make sure you had survivability, meaning that if I have a site like an elementary school and it became an island all of a sudden, so the WAN got cut off, I've got no internet access, can it survive and still be able to make phone calls, do notifications, paging, emergency, 911, all that kind of stuff? Can it still do those things or not? And if that's a requirement for you, then you would put in gateways that would allow you to have that survivability so it continue to operate and to run. So with that in mind, there are cloud options now becoming available where you can, with the cloud, you can have on-premise equipment that you can deploy so that it can take over call processing and be the call processing engine on site in the event of that kind of a failure. So, but those are really new features. Those are just coming out and becoming available, but they are, like I said, it's just that maturity cycle of the feature set. And so those are things that are important to people. And so they're trying to make those things available as quickly as possible. So again, and then what that does then is that if I'm able to do that, well, then I'm also able to, my ability then to continue to be able to dial 911 and to be able to do paging and it's still intact, even though I'm isolated and I can't contact the cloud. And so again, and of course it costs more money to have those kinds of features and so forth, but those are things that are certainly possible. what have you seen in the area of LTE for backup instead of 1 MB lines or other digital circuits? And those are, the answer is we've seen lots of transition to that. People that are either doing LTE. I think the question is probably more asking like using it backup for using something besides 1 MB lines, that kind of thing. So the answer is yeah, there are options for that. So we're getting off of analog. And we're able to have some other kind of connection to do that. How it's typically working though is we're still doing some kind of SIP connection over data. And so just to back up for a second, many of you have probably made the transition from, you've seen the transition from PRI circuits to SIP circuits, right? So you still have a circuit coming into your building, and instead of being a PRI handoff, now it's a SIP handoff. It's just an Ethernet handoff, which is just I'm getting my dial tone over a data path, right? And so if I've got an LTE connection or a backup type scenario at a site, that's still just a data path, and I'm just creating the same thing. I'm just creating a SIP connection over that data path to my chosen provider. And so we're seeing that being done in that direction as a movement for some replacements for 1 MB lines. So the bottom line is, the carriers want out of the 1 MB business, right? So they want to do everything they can to get you out of the 1 MB business. And in the worst case scenarios, what they're doing is just saying, look, we'll give you 1 MB lines, but all they're doing is they're doing a SIP connection to a voice gateway that then breaks it out into analog lines just for you and your system. But as far as the carrier is concerned, it's just a SIP connection. And so it's just different ways of forming and putting it together and so forth. But they're not, there's no analog, going back to their central office or any of those kind of things. It's just data from their perspective. So it's a great question. So PSTN choices, let's talk about that a little bit. So this is from a technical perspective, there's two ways of dealing with your current dial tone. And so one of the things that we'll run into, and Travis, you kind of alluded to this a little bit here. I think maybe this will help answer that question you had for me. But it's like one of the hangups we can have is, what am I doing with my current dial tone? I've got a 3-year contract with my carrier, and it's all for my on-premise system. How do I get moved to the cloud? And so the question kind of comes down to is, can the provider, the platform you're wanting to move to, will it allow you to work with gateways that are still local and talking to local dial tone? And so is there a way to backhaul that? So we kind of call that bring your own voice gateway, kind of say. So instead of bring your own mobile device, bring your own voice gateway. And so what this allows the customer to do is that they can put a voice gateway or keep an existing one they've already got, and we make it talk to the cloud. And so you've got a connection coming in from your carrier into your local, for your dial tone, into your local gateway at your site, and then it hairpins out back out to the cloud. And then when the cloud gets the call, then it directs it to whatever phone that it needs to go to. So it's kind of going out, and then it comes back in to wherever the device might be at. And so that allows you to leverage your existing phone lines or your any kind of existing PSTN service you've got, and use it with your cloud solution that you're trying to do, that you're trying to build. And so that's a very common way to help bridge that gap, and a very doable solution. Now, all that said, you get more benefit when the dial tone terminates directly into the cloud. Okay, so what that means is, I've said, look, I'm choosing this cloud provider. Let's say whether it's Microsoft Teams or say Cisco WebEx. I've chosen this cloud provider, and I want my carrier to terminate my dial tone directly into the cloud. And so they've got these arrangements with these cloud providers to be able to do that. And so what happens then is that there's no reliance on the dial tone or for my users, wherever they may be, there's no reliance on them needing to have access to my site or VPN to my site or any of that kind of thing to allow the data to be able to move around. What if my site goes down, or I lose my connection to that site, and now all of a sudden that voice gateway, it might be getting the dial tone, but I can't get it out to the cloud. I don't have any of those problems anymore, because it's out in the cloud. And so it makes it so that I can be very mobile and I can put users anywhere, and they've got access to all the services, and there's no VPN required, there's no nothing required. It's a much simpler, more elegant kind of solution. So that is where you ultimately want to move there, and there's also less latency involved. So imagine I've got a SIP call coming in, and then it routes back out to the cloud, and that's going to come back down to my organization and get to the user. That introduces some latency. Now, it's not generally noticeable by anybody, so it's been a very, very good solution. But that said, when it's in the cloud, there's just less latency to deal with, less hops to deal with, that kind of stuff. So it's just an overall better solution. The other side of this is you've got to decide, do I want to port all my numbers or not? And so when you move to any of these cloud platforms that we're talking about, when we're using these they've got these collaboration tools, and then I'm trying to port, and then I want it to become my phone system, and I want to port numbers over to that system, the licensing doesn't work the same anymore. So in our traditional world, we might buy a 100 block of DIDs for phone numbers, and that we just want to manage and have. But I may only have, let's say I only have 50 users, I can still have the 100 block of numbers available to me, and it doesn't cost me hardly anything to have it. So it's no big deal. But when you move to the cloud, they'll charge you, they want to charge you on a per user basis, and every number is a user. And so that'll mess up your licensing costs on the cloud side. So one of the things we've got to change in our frame of reference in our mind is that having a block of numbers is just no longer going to be that important to us as we're moving into the future. And so, but it is one of the things you'll have to deal with, and that most people don't realize is going to be the case. When you make one of these transitions, it's just like moving to a new phone system. And so you say, hey, I've got this collaboration tool I want to use. I want to make it my phone system, or I want to integrate it somehow. I want my phones to talk to that system, whatever flavor you're going to do. The need now is that you're going to, when you're moved to that system, your old phones probably won't work with the new system. So especially if you have different vendors. So I went from this vendor to a different vendor for the cloud. Your current phones just aren't going to talk to the cloud. It's not likely going to work. You might be on a system where your phones are new enough, and so I'll use Cisco as an example because that's what I'm super familiar with. In the Cisco world, if you have newer model phones, let's say in the last 3 years or so, we can take those phones, put a different phone mode on them, and they'll talk to the cloud. And so there's ways for us to make that transition. So if the phones are new enough and you're staying with the same vendor, you can make that transition. Now, all that said, one of the big questions that comes up is, how do I need to? Can I just use soft phones? And the answer is yes. Why not? I mean, if you've got users that are willing to use soft phones, they're already using a Teams communication tool. They're already there chatting. They're already communicating with people that way. They're doing meetings there. They're doing video there. Hey, why not I just click call on there and dial in a phone number, and it makes a phone call for me too. That all makes total sense. So by absolutely, you're going to want to do that. So it really just kind of comes down to your users and how comfortable they are with not having a phone on their desk. So generally speaking, our younger generation of folks are really quick to make that jump. Our older generation of folks they just grew up having phones on their desk. They like having phones on their desks, and so you'll just have to decide, what group of people do I have and what do they want, and make some of those decisions. I've got clients that they'll go all soft phone. I've got other clients that are 50-50 and so forth. And and then other clients even that once the user gets used to it, they realize they really don't need a phone on their desk, and so they'll take it off. One of the biggest problems that we run into that is a gotcha that people don't think about has to do with headsets and soft phones and so forth. So and you may have already run into it and had to deal with some of it. So number one, if you decide to go soft phones, that's great. I don't have to buy a new phone to do that, but now you need to have a headset. And so you're going to pay money for a headset. So there's not always I get to save all this money. You might save some money, but if you buy a really nice headset, they cost about the same amount of money as a phone does. So just got to keep that in mind from a budget perspective. It's not necessarily a big time saver. Now, the issue that we run into here is around the main issue we run into here is around people trying to use Bluetooth, like AirPods, those kind of things, and they have those with their mobile device, and then they want to sync it and have it work with their laptop, desktop, that kind of thing. And then what they end up running into is they'll complain, hey, I'm having trouble picking up the call. I can't move it. I can't get it to it's not connected. They have all these connection problems. And it's not the system. It's just the headset, the Bluetooth with the devices that are going on there. They're just not perfect. And so many of you, I know from my phone, if I go from AirPod to phone to my car and back, very often I got to hit a button, do something, hold on a minute, where'd that call go? Oh, they're on my AirPods, they're in my pocket, I can pull them out, just that kind of stuff. And so the recommendation then is that for us IT folks, we can navigate through that and figure it out. But most of our users, they get frustrated over that stuff. So we kind of tell people, like, look, get people good headset and make it work with their device. And then they're just two separate headset things they're doing. So they might have AirPods and then have a headset dedicated to their soft phone. And maybe if you need to save some money, do it in a wired, from a wired basis. So, all right, a few other quick things here. Camera quality is a big deal, as you guys know, as we're doing meetings. So just kind of make sure you're looking out for camera quality. People don't realize that when you're using your device as a speakerphone, I'm on a speakerphone right now talking to you on a video unit, and so it's meant for that kind of stuff. But if I'm in a bullpen and I move a bunch of people to soft phones and they're not ready and they're not thinking about headsets and those kind of things, next thing you know, you have a whole bunch of people talking out loud. It's pretty noisy. So think about that. Conference rooms, when you're deciding to move down this path, you want to make sure that you've got that you are dealing with that you're thinking about the devices you might need in your conference rooms and how will that integrate with the platform you've chosen. And so what you want to be doing here is you want to buy into a platform that allows you to manage all of these pieces under one roof, if at all possible. And so the more things you get under one roof, then the easier it is to be for you from an administration perspective to really be able to manage it. And so you don't want to end up with a whole bunch of platforms that you're trying to manage. And conference rooms and video conferencing and that kind of stuff is just another piece of that puzzle. The last thing I'll mention here is just on mobile capabilities. So on the mobile side, some people think that all of a sudden that they can be, because I have a mobile app now, that it's going to work great when I'm driving down the road. And the answer is it's only as good as your internet, as your data connection is going to be. And we often run into this issue. I know I do, where if I'm in a metro area, it works pretty good when I'm moving. But if I jump on 99 and I'm making a phone call through my business app, through my collaboration app, that data path can't stay, won't provide me the kind of latency that I need to have a good call. And so just know that if you got users that need to be able to do that, that's currently today, that's still kind of a little problematic. But we anticipate that'll be resolved here in the next couple, 2-3 years. All right, I saw a few more questions in here. I just want to make sure I hit them here. So I know I'm moving quick here. Let's see. About uptime reliability due to more variables outside of customers' control. Okay, I think we talked about that. Where does this fit into your conference system integration? Okay, let me talk about that for a minute. And then also, what trend do you see relative to handsets? More useful? Yeah, so I think I talked about that from a soft phone perspective, and I got that one. All right, so I think the one question I haven't answered here is the where does this fit into your conference system integration, like with Teams and so forth? And so again, I'm just back to you want to make sure that whatever platform you're choosing, so if it's a Teams platform is what you're going with, it's like, can Teams support the conferencing solutions that I want? So Microsoft Teams has a thing called the Microsoft, they're basically Microsoft Teams Room certified. And so they certify vendors then that have conferencing devices. And then those conferencing devices can actually be managed and looked at in the Microsoft Teams portal. And so from the online portal. And so you want to make sure you're working with vendors that are going to have that kind of capability. Now, on the Cisco side, Cisco's just decided that, hey, Microsoft's going to be a big player. They're the big guy in the room. They continue to, move. They're just going to always, that's going to be the case. Well, let's make sure all of our stuff can integrate with the Microsoft platform. So it can go either way. You buy Cisco video gear. It can operate on a Cisco environment or in a Microsoft Teams environment. So it'll go both directions. My thing to you is that when you're looking at vendors, no matter who it is, just make sure you're making choices that allow you to integrate into the portals so you can manage it all through one place. To me, that's the main key.